Barovia, a gloomy realm of valleys isolated by wolf-prowled forests and treacherous mountains, stretches out as far as the eye can see. Dense clouds cast the land in a perpetual gloom that pervades its superstitious people who live in small, somber, scattered villages. And all around it, an impermeable mist, a wall of fog that may as well be made of stone. For any who venture into its depths find escape quite impossible. At best, they find their way back out of the fog exactly where they entered. At worst, the mists can foment madness in even the most sound-minded of individuals, and for many, the mists simply begin to choke their victim, as if they were poisonous fumes leading to a graphic and painful death. And above it all looms the grim silhouette of a grand castle, Castle Ravenloft, standing high atop a natural pillar of rock against the cliffs to the north of the village for which this region was named. The dark Svallic woods oppressively surround the village and cliff-perched stronghold. Lying in the shadow of Castle Ravenloft, the village of Barovia is oppressed by fear. In Barovia, the night is a curse. With the dying of the light, the howls of wolves and shrieks of raven swarms echo through the dismal valleys, and wicked souls slip from the darkened spires of Castle Ravenloft to work the will of an immortal overlord. For this is the realm of the first vampire, Count Strahd von Zarovich, and his depravities have doomed him and countless generations to endlessly repeating cycles of obsession and despair. Smothered by the dread of their aloof overlord, his baleful servants, and ancient evils that fester unopposed, all the residents of Barovia know to fear the mists and the long Barovian nights, as through them the devil Strahd watches and reaches to claim whatever he desires. Yet none realize their torments have played out over and over again, all part of Strahd's plot to claim one specific victim who has eluded him for generations. I am Omar Timsaw.
I am William Stark.
And this is D&D Legends and Lore. Hey everyone. Before we get into today's episode, we just wanted to thank you. All of you. Whether you're liking, commenting, and subscribed, engaging with the community over on Discord, casually lurking, supporting us more directly through Patreon and YouTube memberships, or by checking out our affiliates and sponsors. We appreciate the support in all its many forms from the bottom of our hearts. We couldn't do this without you.
I am the ancient. I am the land. My beginnings are lost in the darkness of the past. I was the warrior. I was good and just. I thundered across the land like the wrath of a just god. But the war years and the killing years wore down my soul, as the wind wears stone into sand. All goodness slipped from my life. I found my youth and strength gone, and all I had left after the glory of conquest was death. My army settled in the valley of Barovia and took power over the people, in the name of a just god, but with none of a god's grace or justice, more a jester. I've studied much since then. Vampire is my new name. Title: I still lust for life and youth, and I curse the living that took them from me. Even the sun is against me. It is the sun and its light I fear, for little else harms me now. Even a plank of wood through my heart would not kill me. Though those archers are long dead now, their weapons are but playthings to me. A sturdy stake would hold me for movement, but that is nothing. I now reside in Ravenloft. I live among the dead and sleep beneath the very stones of this hollow castle of despair. I shall seal shut the walls of the stairs that none may disturb me, the way the walls of Barovia are sealed by the mists. My castle, my valley, my kingdom. I am Strahd.
Strahd stood within a keep courtyard in this newly conquered land he now held so dear. Behind him, a horn sounded, and all armsmen who were not actually on guard duty hustled into the courtyard. They stood at attention, all eyes looking to their lord. Strahd drew his dagger, raised it to the sky and brought it level again, pointing it briefly north, east, south, and west, then stabbed it lightly into his wrist.
I am Strahd. I am the land,
he said, intoning the ancient epigram that was part and parcel of the ceremony of possession. The blood welled out, dribbling down his palm, and dripped onto the muddy earth at his feet.
Draw near and witness,
he added.
I, Strahd, am the land.
He was the eldest son of King Barov and Queen Ravenovia. As the firstborn, the weight of his family's legacy fell entirely on Strahd, and he was nothing if not a dutiful son and heir. After the death of his father, King Barov, Strahd waged long, bloody wars against his family's enemies. He spent the better part of his life leading the Order of the Silver Dragon and other forces to reclaim lands lost to various barbarian tribes and rivals. Eventually, Strahd and his army cornered the last of these enemies in a remote mountain valley before slaying them all. Strahd named the valley Barovia, after his deceased father, and was so struck by its scenic beauty that he decided to settle there permanently. For the first time in his life, Strahd was relieved of both duty and death-dealing, but in it he did not find happiness or reprieve. The long life of war had taken its toll on him. Now in his late 40s, Strahd was no longer a man in possession of the youth he had never had the opportunity to enjoy. And now, what was he? Strahd stared into the faces of his devoted men and the rewards of his victory, and he felt nothing. He was now a man with a heart of stone who had seen so much slaughter that he could no longer feel joy. He reflected bitterly on how he had given his youth to the sword for a family that wasn't even there to see the victory. And yet, he felt the grim sense of duty come over him again. To honor his father Barov, Strahd had renamed the conquered valley Barovia. But his mother, who still lived, deserved an equal honor. In this land he would have built a grand castle upon a 1,000-foot pillar of stone, so that it could be both impregnable and too be surrounded on all sides by the idyllic view of the Barovian countryside. He would do this for his mother Ravenovia, and for her the castle would be named Castle Ravenloft. Strahd scoured his conquered lands for wizards and artisans, brought them to the valley of Barovia, and commanded them to raise a castle to rival the magnificent fortresses of his ancestral homeland, a place where the von Zarovich name would live forever. With his fortune and ego, he pressed and galvanized his architects, and the castle was raised in record time. A monument and a masterpiece both. When it was complete, Strahd called for his mother and younger brother to come to Barovia and stay with him. The Lord hoped that surrounding himself with family might make him feel alive again. Their response to his invitation was not without hesitance. Strahd was not surprised by this unspoken reluctance. His mother, Queen Ravenovia, had long lamented the death of her husband Barov, and over the years had become fearful of Strahd. War had made him cold and arrogant, even cruel. Nothing like the warm young boy she had raised. Strahd knew this was the reason she kept his younger brother, Sergei, away from the battlefield. Strahd envied the love and attention his mother visited upon his brother, even if he did not falter for it. Still, he would insist on them coming to the new seat of the family's power. He would not dwell alone in this stone monument, and so his invitation became a command. They would come to Castle Ravenloft. Strahd nodded as his party of retainers fell into line around him, and he led the way through the massive doors of the castle's entry. Strahd could see Sergei's standard-bearers were just emerging from under the portcullis. He gazed at the brother he had not seen since he was a babe in his mother's arms. They were hardly strangers. Strahd had kept a relationship with Sergei via written letters over his lifetime of war campaigns, but reading a letter was not the same. Strahd looked at his brother. He was blessed with the strong von Zarovich features of black hair, high cheeks, and a tough jaw. But these were markedly softened by the von Royen side of the family. He had his mother's warm blue eyes. By the gods, he was a handsome man, an opinion very obviously shared by all the young, and not a few of the older, female members of the court and staff. Younger, much more handsome, open, and smiling. Everything that Strahd was not, and the seed of jealousy took root in the lord of the castle. Sergei reined in his horse and dismounted. The brothers embraced, but then Sergei's smile fell. He looked his older brother in the eyes. It's mother. She tried, but on the way she grew ill. She did not survive the trip. In sorrowful disappointment, Strahd sealed his mother's body in a crypt beneath the castle. She would forever rest beneath the castle of her namesake, having never set eyes upon it in life. Strahd found that his heart, which he once thought made of stone, was now pierced by emotions of bitterness, loss, and spite. The death of his mother was a stark reminder of his own dwindling life. He had spent his youth in the service of his family, his heritage, and his land. He had given it all, and in return, all he was left with was a cold heart and a body that had begun to fail its master. As Strahd became reacquainted with his brother, he initially saw the reunion as an opportunity to be a mentor to Sergei. He attempted to train Sergei in the ways of a soldier and a ruler, one who valued discipline and steel. But raised so far from real danger and war, Strahd found himself frustrated by Sergei's lack of edge. His brother's kindness would be a liability in a land as dark as Barovia. Or was it jealousy yet again coloring Strahd's thoughts? He looked at his brother and saw himself in him, or at least the man as he should have been. He could not fault Sergei for his own life, but that his had been all but used up, sacrificed to the demands of duty and obligation. When possible, the eldest child always went into soldiering, the second administered the estates, and the third was consecrated to the service of the gods. Such binding tradition could be broken, but when one is raised to it and knows nothing else, one has little chance to discover until too late that there are other things in life. He looked at Sergei and felt a hot surge of anger for his lost years and envy for all those that lay before his brother. Yet he could not hate him. Sergei was bound by tradition as well. Indeed, as Strahd had before him, he'd no intention of breaking with it. Sergei was pledged to the church and glad of the fact. Strahd's anger eventually cooled into a kind of pity for Sergei's blindness. Someday, perhaps, he would come to understand how he'd been manipulated and feel as Strahd felt now. But it would not be so. Sergei's young and bright heart led him to show great interest in the people of Barovia, the beauty of the valley, and the spiritual well-being of the land. This in turn quickly captivated the hearts of the populace. They came to love Sergei, whereas they merely feared Strahd. Strahd's jealousy of his brother soon became a quiet, bitter resentment. Strahd had done the dirty work of conquering the land, but now Sergei was the one reaping the social rewards of peace. Then, news came of Sergei's comings and goings among the common folk. He had met a girl. He was in love. He would forsake his clerical duty for her. They were to be married. Strahd was furious. What a fool, he thought. He feared that Sergei would drag the von Zarovich name down with his foolish heart. And yet, at his brother's insistence, he deigned to at least meet this girl. Perhaps there was some way he could salvage the situation. Less than a week later, Sergei brought her up by carriage from the village, for the first and last time. She had no family, having been one of the orphans protected and raised by the local church, and would now be chaperoned until the wedding day. Strahd considered that the girl's lack of a family was fortunate. It meant, at the very least, no extended family mucking about the court and awkwardly in the way. But when Sergei escorted her up the steps to present her, all Strahd's disparaging thoughts fell away like dead leaves. She was, without doubt, the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. As she approached, he discovered that she was as beyond beauty as a river in a spring flood is beyond a drop of water. Strahd felt himself drawn into the flow, swept under by the current. Overwhelmed, he could almost hear the roar and rush of it instead of his brother's voice when he spoke. Strahd, this is Tatiana. She raised her face, the clear skin, the great eyes, brighter than gems, and full dark lips had come together in such a way as to make all other women seem ugly by comparison. There was no comparison. She was unique. She was perfect. Strahd felt his heart swoop and soar at the sheer joy of looking at her. This raised a blush on her cheek, and he instantly set to put her at ease. He took one of her hands and with a bow, lightly kissed her fingertips.
Welcome to Castle Ravenloft, Tatiana. Be welcome. Look upon this as your true home, forevermore.
His words seemed to go right to her heart, and her returning smile was like that first glimpse of sun after a bitter winter. All he wanted to do for the rest of his life was keep that smile on her ever after. And then she looked at Sergei. It was as if the sun that had favored him had been all along hidden by a cloud. Its brilliant glory now shone in full upon Sergei, and Sergei alone. The following days soared past more swiftly than a hawk in flight for Strahd. Each revealed a new delight in Tatiana and inflicted fresh misery upon his heart. Each drove home the fact that, no matter how much he wanted her, she was not interested in him. She never called Strahd by his name, only as elder or old one to show her respect for him and all the years of life he'd lived. By subtle acts, Strahd attempted to play the suitor. He gifted Tatiana with jewels and fine clothes, commissioned her portrait, even played music for her while she sat for it. And though she accepted all with deep appreciation and happiness, it was always in a way that made it clear she saw him only as brother and not rival against Sergei. Unable to accept this, Strahd's infatuation with Tatiana devolved into a dangerous fixation. He began stalking her, watching her from the shadows of the castle and the woods. As his obsession crystallized, Strahd began to convince himself that Tatiana didn't actually love Sergei. She was merely dazzled by Sergei's youth, and that only a man of his substance and experience could truly appreciate her. Strahd began to view Sergei not as a brother, but as a thief who had stolen the prize Strahd had earned with his years of war. If traditional methods would fail to draw her attention from his brother, then he would seek out alternative means. Previously, Strahd's interest in the magical arts had been that of an experimenting dilettante. Now it occurred to him that some magical spell might afford the means to draw Tatiana's attention away from Sergei and over to himself. But he was running out of time. The wedding between Sergei and Tatiana fast approached. Strahd sought out and studied every tome he could find in desperate earnest. He sent out servants to gather up any books of magical content for his consumption, searching desperately for a magical method to make Tatiana love him instead of his brother. A love spell, a potion, anything. Despite his unwaning focus and the considerable growth of his own magical prowess, Strahd's search found nothing save for a passage of wisdom that claimed the following: love is a force so mysterious in its workings that it could not be successfully reproduced by magical methods. Strahd tore the page from its binding and burned it. But when despair had nearly and finally taken him, something came to Strahd in the night. Some entity he did not recognize. It wore the faces of his family, his servants, and Tatiana herself. It whispered to him, coaxed him, mocked him. It offered to Strahd his heart's desire, and in the darkness of his study it revealed its true form. That of an unending, oppressive darkness, blacker than even the darkest night. It filled the room, its very presence a pressure that threatened to crush him. It was then he knew what this thing was. It was death itself. Death washed over him and receded for the moment.
Have you come for me? If so, then take me and be damned.
Nothing. Strahd waited for many terrible, slow heartbeats. Then,
I have come on your behalf.
It answered.
You have fed me well.
Gods, but wasn't that true? All those years of war, how many had he killed in the cause?
You are due your reward. Your reward, Strahd von Zarovich. You hunger for your brother's betrothed, for your lost youth. I shall remove the rival from your path, and you shall age not one more day. If you do as I tell you.
There it was. The parley, the bargaining, the trade. What did it want of him? What could death possibly want?
Nothing beyond your means or skill.
Death said clearly.
What must I do?
Strahd whispered. It stopped, turned, and laughed. Strahd found himself alone in his study, his brow profuse with cold sweat. He reflected on the entity that called itself Death's instructions. Some of it made no sense, but oftentimes in magic, one must perform rituals with no discernible purpose to them. It's a foolish practitioner who ignores them or discounts their importance. This was dark magic. He was on the threshold of true necromancy, yet oddly calm about it. There would be a price. No pact was without one. But he knew he was willing to pay it. For the benefits, to not age one day more was one thing. But to have Tatiana, she was worth any price. If this dark power had wanted his very soul, he would give it up for her. She would turn to him and smile and laugh for him alone. She was springtime and summer rain, autumn color and winter stillness. And by tomorrow night, the night of the wedding, she would be his. He only needed to seal the pact in blood. The night of the wedding, Strahd approached Sergei in the castle gardens. Sergei was done up in his gaudiest uniform, a soldier who had never really served. Strahd took out a bundle of fabric.
For the groom I have a present, well suited to the day.
Sergei's smile faltered as an assassin's blade seemed to leap from the wrappings.
I see that you recognize it. The time-honored weapon of a Baal Verzi assassin. The sheath is made from human skin, usually from the weapon's first victim. The carvings on the hilt are runes of power. Legend has it that it is bad luck to draw such a dagger unless you can give it blood.
Strahd smiled warmly.
I'm generally not superstitious, but I think this time it's better not to tempt fate. Don't you agree?
Moving swifter than the eye could follow, swifter than thought, Strahd struck, driving the short blade up under his brother's breastbone and into his heart. For what seemed an eternity, Sergei met Strahd's hateful glee with a look of hurt astonishment. Then slowly, doubled over, silently falling until he was gone. Strahd recited the words Death had spoken to him the night before.
Drink of the blood, first from the instrument, and then of the chalice.
Thus were his instructions. Strahd licked the blade clean and then, hungrily began to drink deeply from his brother's killing wound. Strahd found a perverse warmth in his brother's cooling corpse. It renewed his energy and spirit, and he felt strength such as he'd never known before, tearing through his veins like hot lightning. It was euphoric. Strahd snapped himself out of it. There was little time. He had to clean himself up before someone from the wedding party walked in. He cleaned his bloodied hands and face, and then sought out a nearby mirror. He was so pale, paper white, whiter. And then his very image began to fade, until in the mirror stood no man at all, only empty air. Strahd attempted to pass off Sergei's death as an assassination by a political rival, and in the chaos, he sought out Tatiana. He found her outside the castle chapel. The candlelight within the chapel was more than sufficient to overflow the stained glass windows and spill out into the night. Tatiana was huddled in a pool of color from one of them, her white gown catching and holding gem-like shades of green, blue, gold, red. Strahd looked down at her. If he had to kill a dozen brothers, drink a river of their blood to have her, he would have done so. She made no move, not even to wipe at the tears trailing down her cheeks. Strahd reached out to comfort and embrace her. He called to her. His voice took on an unnatural tone. At first, her despair left her without the will to respond, but then her eyes clouded over for many moments. Strahd felt a palpable link forming between them. He could feel his supernatural enchantment taking hold of her. What power he had gained. She would be his. She blinked, her brows coming together in puzzlement. Then her hand came up to caress him. His heart's desire. She said his name, not old one nor elder. She said his name the way one lover speaks to another. Her face tilted up to meet his. Strahd was overwhelmed with desire, with hunger. But then the hold he'd held over Tatiana began to falter. She cringed and stiffened in his arms. She resisted. He released her, and she stepped back to gain her balance. And in that moment, she reeled, both at the horrifying thing she had been about to do, and at the monster that stood before her. Without a word, she darted toward the low gate leading to the overlook. Strahd called after her and then pursued. He was right behind her, but too late. He snagged the trailing hem of her dress, but she tugged free with hardly a pause. Then she hurled herself over the low wall as she wailed in despair for her lost love. Up in one light bound. Strahd clawed and caught only air. The mist had cleared from most of the mountain, but the valley below was still hidden in it. Tatiana's frail figure dropped, spinning, into that roiling white cloud. Tattered fingers of it stretched toward her like something hungry, and, arms spread wide, she plunged headfirst into their grasp. She shrieked the whole way down. Then, silence. Then, laughter. Its laughter. Strahd's agony was so great that he did not feel the first arrow when it slammed into his side. A second caught him in the back, knocking him flat onto the ground. Pushing to his feet, Strahd stared, uncomprehending, up at the towers where the shots had come from. Archers stood ready at the crenellations, their bows fully drawn, and aimed directly at him. More men crowded into the overlook. His ruse was discovered. They saw him for what he was, a monster. His former soldiers were all poised to shoot, and one after another, they did. Strahd braced and took the arrows, welcoming them, knowing for himself the same madness that had seized and driven Tatiana to end her own life. It would end now. He would trade this small pain for the obliteration of the larger. No hell could possibly hold worse suffering for him than living without her. To age not one day more. Very well then, he would die now. He welcomed shot after shot. Blood oozed from every wound. He'd taken enough shots to kill a dozen men, but still lived. This wasn't right. Then Strahd realized, to age not one day more, he wasn't going to die. Not tonight, not ever. 1,000 nights, 1,000 years lay before him, without her, alone. The sky went black. Strahd's eyes glowed red. A vampire he had become. Fueled by the rage of losing Tatiana and at his own inability to die, Strahd allowed his new vampiric instincts to consume him. He rose up as his would-be killers, his betrayers, stood in horror. Strahd slaughtered every guard and guest who stood in his way. What was originally supposed to be a wedding feast became a bloody massacre. For hours, Strahd stalked the halls of Castle Ravenloft in a fury of death-dealing and devouring, until all was silent. Strahd looked to the skies in despair. There he saw the faces of his father and mother in the thunderclouds above, looking down upon him and judging him. Then, a strange, unnatural fog began rolling into the valley from the mountain passes, and Barovia was not merely covered in the mists, but swallowed by them. The valley was physically ripped from the world of the living. He had destroyed the family bloodline and doomed all of Barovia. The castle and the valley had been spirited away, locked in a demiplane surrounded on all sides by deadly fog. For Strahd and what remained of his people, there would be no escape. The pact was sealed.
From the families of the valley, one spirit shone above all others, a rare beauty who was called perfection, joy, and treasure. Her name, I scarce can put ink to parchment to blaspheme it. Her name was Tatiana, and I longed for her. I loved her with all my heart. I was infatuated with her for her youth, and I craved her for her joy. The death she saw in me turned her from me, and so I came to hate death, the very idea. My hate is very strong. I would not be called that so soon. I made a pact with death, powers of the dark, a pact of blood. On the day of their wedding, I slaughtered Sergei, my brother, my own flesh and blood. This sealed my pact with that blood, spilled across the stone of Ravenloft. I found Tatiana weeping. She hid in the garden east of the chapel. She fled from me. She would not let me explain, and a great anger swelled within me. She had to understand. The pact, it was made for her. I pursued her. Finally, with despair etched on her face, she flung herself from the walls of Ravenloft. I watched. I saw everything. I watched her fall from my grasp forever. Forever? It was 1,000 feet through the mists. No trace of her was ever found. But of the murder I brought on my own brother, I would soon be brought to pay the price. Not so easily would I give recompense. My own guards pierced me through with dozens of arrows to my soul. Through and through I was pinioned, but I did not die. Nor, however, did I live. I became undead. I became forever.
Strahd retreated to the high tower of Ravenloft. He would spend the weeks following the blood wedding in a state of clinical observation. Perhaps it was the numb state he found himself in after losing Tatiana. Perhaps it was his being a man of reason in war. Perhaps it was his new inhuman perspective. Whatever the reason, he treated his new vampirism like a new weapon system he needed to master. He noted with dark fascination that he no longer needed to breathe. His heartbeat had ceased, and normal food tasted like ash in his mouth. In contrast, his hunger for blood was not as a stomachache, so much as a mental screaming that only blood could silence. He learned about his limitations through painful trial and error. the searing agony of sunlight on his skin, and the strange physical repulsion he felt when trying to cross running water. He discovered that he could command the lesser creatures of Barovia, the wolves, the bats, and the rats, and he began to view the entire ecosystem of the valley as an extension of his own nervous system. He was now the undisputed master of Barovia, immortal and invincible, but he was also a prisoner in a land of fog, forever separated from the woman he traded his soul to save. As the centuries passed, Strahd came to understand the true nature of his prison. The curse that engulfed Barovia meant that the soul of Tatiana was also trapped within this realm, her soul being recycled by the mists, the cruel joke of it all. That thing which called itself death, that dark power or powers that granted him immortality, were his jailers. They would provide him with a Tatiana in every generation just to give him hope, only to snatch her away at the last moment. Very well. He would accept his role. Strahd built a network of spies and informants to watch for the next reincarnation. He became a patient predator, willing to wait decades for the next cycle to begin. No longer human, he would be the beast his people saw him as. Strahd stopped carrying on the facade of acting like a mortal nobleman and began acting like the god king he was. He created his first vampire spawns to serve as his court and ensured that the people of Barovia knew that while they may live in the valley, their lives belong to him. And from time to time, the dark powers that kept him here would provide for Strahd with the entertainment of outsiders venturing haplessly into his lands. Not the slightest glimmer of light escaped the castle's tall black windows. Its broken battlements sketched a jagged line across the darkened sky. Castle Ravenloft brooded over a bleak, mist-shrouded valley. Constructed on the sheer side of a 1,000-foot cliff, the terrible fortress was occupied by something ancient and evil. A blot of night detached from the shadowed walls of the castle and moved out onto a narrow balcony. Lightning revealed the sneering countenance of Count Strahd von Zarovich. His eyes, burning with a never-satisfied hunger, took in the drizzling twilight, the looming peaks, and the few sad lights of the village below. He clutched one hand to his chest and muttered, as if making a promise, or perhaps delivering a curse, a single name. Strahd grimaced, and his sharp canine teeth promised mayhem. A bitter wind spun dead leaves about him, billowing his velvet-lined cape. Another fit of lightning burst from the storm's underbelly, casting stark light across Strahd's face. The angular muscles of his visage and the taut lines in his hands revealed a man accustomed to exercising complete authority. In that face, no pity lived, but perhaps hints of growing madness. His eyes narrowed as he spied the newcomers. A group of adventurers traveled down Old Svalak Road toward the village. His grimace transformed into a hideous smile. He knew they were coming, knew why they came, and relished what would be their ultimate fate. No plan could be called good unless blood was spilled during its execution. All the pawns were finally assembled. All the pieces, prepared for so long, were in place and waiting to play their parts. Soon enough, Strahd would personally attend the newcomers. This has been D&D Legends and Lore. Thanks so much for listening or watching on your platform of choice. If you enjoyed this episode, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Also, consider leaving us a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. It really helps others find the show. If you'd like to support us more directly, check out our Patreon or channel memberships on YouTube. There you'll also find ad-free early episodes as well as live play and third-party D&D content. Links, as always, are in the description. With that, thank you for listening, and happy adventuring.